So let's say you want to cross a river. However, unfortunately, you cannot swim. Ow, that really hurt. Well, then do I have the tutorial for you? Because today I'm going to show you how to build a good-looking bridge in Minecraft. And not just some shitty bridge like this. We need to be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, our first step is going to be shaping the bridge. So over here, I have laid out just a couple of examples of what I mean when I say shaping. Determining what you're going to do, essentially. So right here I have, a big arch with upright posts, just a little bit on the end, and a major flat portion with the flat top bridge. Right here I have the more curved, gently upsloping bridge. And over here, it's basically that bridge over there, but like shorter and smaller. I really should have come up with a different shape for that one. Okay, anyway, but we need to determine what's going to go best with our gap that we're trying to bridge here, which is this gap right here. So, if it was a tall gap, it might make sense to do a bunch of big posts. If it's a tall and long gap, bunch of big posts with cross sections, kind of like this. But since this is more of a shorter gap, I can probably use a gentle upslope and some form of more gentle arch like this across the gap. So the first thing we'll do is we'll come in here and we'll figure out what we want the top portion of the rounded bridge to look like. Since we're going with the center style here, we just figure it out. What I usually do is I figure out where the center is going to be, and then I bridge out from there, and I let them get incrementally smaller as it goes down on the side here, so it rounds off kind of like a circle. Then what I'll do, then next step is we'll come under here, and we're just going to figure out where we want the base of our underarch to be. So I usually go 2 or so below. It allows me to do some cooler patterns on the underside of the bridge if I have a space for blocks here. That way I can have a path color, and then I can have an underside of my bridge color, and they're not sharing the same thing. We'll continue on here to the sides. We'll just start rounding it off like a circle. Now that we've laid out the shape of our bridge, we move on to our next step, the block palette. Now, for this build, as you may have seen from the thumbnail, it's a stone bridge. So I went through and I picked out different stone materials, and I also threw in some wild cards over here with gray terracotta and gray concrete powder and trapdoors. Now, these aren't necessary and kind of expensive items, so trapdoors is probably the most necessary thing out of these blocks here, but I threw them in because they can be good little throw-offs for some more color pop. So now that we've selected our block palette, we're just going to start going through and covering the bridge. One of the things I like to do is make my little base here, my underside, a different color, or a different block than is used everywhere else, kind of like a trim. And I also find that staggering it between 2 different blocks tends to make it a little bit nicer looking. Additionally, I find that bringing other blocks like half slabs and stairs in some scenarios in on my little arch here allows it to have more of a curve and generally makes it look better. Suck it, squid. Now on to the next step. We're going to work on the top side of the bridge here. Now I usually call this line I've drawn out here bridge level or path level, because that's where we're going to put the path essentially. Now on top of that is where we put the wall for the bridge, anything that's going to keep someone who's walking across it from just, meandering off and falling into the river, because you don't want people falling into the river, I guess. Maybe you do. So for what we'll do for the level here, what I usually will do is I'll come through with another block that I think represents a trim. In this case, I'm using chiseled stone bricks. I find they work pretty well as little corners. They also work as great launch points for putting stone brick walls or other wall blocks that you can use as almost like the basis of a lamppost or a place to put a lamp or something to add light to your bridge later on. And then what I do is I come through and I can just plop in stairs next to these. Great way to add wall. And I can also use slabs on the side to continue the whole trim. So now that we've figured out how the arch at the top of our bridge here is working, we've figured out where our little retaining wall to keep people from just walking in is going, or at least to tell them they're not supposed to walk in is going, we move on to the next step. And the next step, well, we've put these chisel bricks just all around, and they usually serve as great post points for lamps and stuff. But I also find them as a great way to just break up parts of the bridge. So if we come in with the same trim block from earlier, it never gets old. And we just fill in the gap. So we now have little bridge posts. This is also something where we can take trapdoors, in this case spruce trapdoors, and kind of put it next to it, and adds a little bit of pop out, a little bit of depth. Additionally, kind of adds some more color to the build, changes the color, and it stands out, really. It's a little detail. So now that we've figured out posts, we can come in and we can just fill in the gap. Now, I'm going to start by filling in the gap with just one block. And then I'm going to come back through, and I'm going to texture it later. So the reason I'm doing it like this is because if you fill it in with one block, you can figure out where our different depth points and stuff are. And then you can come back through with your other blocks, and you can just sporadically place them in wherever. I don't know why I've found that this works. It just works. It just does. And because it works, we're not going to mess with it. So now I've laid out the sidewall of the bridge, and I decided to come through here in the center and add some posts here as well to break up what was a lawn portion of just one texture. I also then came in here and I figured out that if you add andesite walls, depth, yes, depth. I don't know what better way to say that. Now, next I'm going to come here to the top of the bridge, and I'm just going to add little details like this. Now this here, I just used some fence gates to get an arch on them, because one, that's a cool trick that I learned a while back, and ever since I have enjoyed using it whenever I see fit on bridges. I don't know why it does this, what in the code makes it do this, but it's a really good trick for trying to get a curvature on like a fence. So I'll come through at the top of the bridge and I'll do stuff like that from time to time to add some more depth. Add some more curvature, add some more, so it's just not a flat bridge. Now, moving on from this is one side of a bridge, but as you may know, bridges have two sides, generally, which means now I gotta do this side. Now it's time to talk about the underside of the bridge. Now in this part, we're going to fill in the underside here, and we're going to inset it just a bit, so that way it looks a little bit different from following the arch. It'll add some more depth on the underside, and if we do it right, it'll also give us some good points later on to add different bits of greenery and have them almost creep to the wall. So for this, what I will generally do is I'll come through. Usually I'll just use solid stone brick to start, and I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna lay out 1 point up from the arch on almost all the points. Now, once I've laid out 1 point up on almost all the points on our arch here, I'm going to come through to this layer, and this is the only one where I use half slabs usually, just because I don't want to mess up this fence wall texture, because anyone who has ever played Minecraft knows that walls like to get messed up whenever you add things to them. Next, I'm just going to come through and I'm going to find different places, and I'm just going to add slabs and stairs and whatever I see might be the best block for the area, to just kind of rib out the curve. As you may see here, I'm actually kind of building a second arch here, or this would be a third arch here. I'm building a third arch underneath the bridge, and this is to add more structure. I'm not a civil engineer. I don't know if this actually would work, but I mean, I am an engineering student, so if it makes sense to me. So I went back in, I finished off the underarch here, and I added some stairs just so that way this underarch here is not sticking out as much. And now the underarch actually follows the same shape as the original arch. But now it's time to go up to the actual platform level of the bridge. Now for this, I find the best thing to use is generally deep slate. I don't know, maybe I'm just a deep slate simp. I always use deep slate. So what I will do is I will come through and I'm just going to lay a path for the bridge to follow, where the steps would be, just lay it out. And so just like that, I have cobbled the bridge, but it could have more texture. So now what I generally find is best to add texture to a pathway like this, using deep slate, is regular basalt adds that stony texture, and I find that this is generally one of the better blocks to use for an area like this. Maybe it's just because it looks like an off-brand cobblestone, but hey, it works, so it works. The other texture that I find works extremely well with deep slate cobble is just regular smooth deep slate. So now we move on to some final touches here on the top side of the bridge. And for this, we're going to use lanterns and spruce fences, or really any type of fence that, matches your biome. You could probably use birch fences, honestly. But just go through, add little bits of post to your pre-laid out fences. And once you've added your posts to your pre-laid out fences, you can come through and just slap a lantern on top. What this does is it not only makes the bridge bright at night so mobs don't spawn on it, if you're in survival and that matters, but it also lights up the bridge, makes it look nice. And if you really want to continue with the theme, you can continue this style of lantern on the following path, just to add more and make it look super neat. It's raining. So now we move on to the final part of making a bridge, and that is blending it into the environment. Right now, we just kind of have a pretty bland stone bridge sitting in the middle of a river. And, some people might like this. This would work fairly well in like a city, where everything else is also bland and stone, and it's just walls everywhere. But since we have this kind of in the middle of a forest, we need to blend it into the environment. And to blend it into the environment, we can take things like coarse dirt and add it to the banks. This makes it look like it was built here. It makes it look like the grass has never recovered from when we destroyed the environment to slap a bridge on it. We can continue to go a little bit farther than the coarse dirt as well, and we can also blend in a bit of rooted dirt. Now, rooted dirt, again, it's kind of an optional thing, but it can also be pretty nice whenever you come through with your leaves later on. It makes it look like there's actually roots in the ground for these leaves versus them just kind of coming out of coarse dirt, coming out of nowhere. So, rooted dirt works here and there. And now on to the next step of making it look like it blends into the environment, the actual leaves around the bridge. So we can make it look like vines and stuff have grown on the bridge if we add just oak leaves or other forms of leaf onto the side of the bridge. Just adds. Now, other than leaves, there's also glow lichen and vines. Again, glow lichen, the best way to contain vines from ever spreading somewhere you don't want them to. So, glow lichen, glow lichen, glow lichen, like everywhere. Great way to also light up the environment. And then let's say we want a vine here. Boom, now we have a vine. And look at that, that vine can't spread to an area we don't want now, because vines can't grow upward. But I think I'm just going to let it grow down. Can add an interesting dynamic. Now there's one more block I have here on hand, and that's glowberries. And it's because the underside of the bridge generally gets fairly dark. But with a bit of glowberry action and a bit of cropping, we can crop a glowberry just in general, random places around our bridge, and I'm going to say it again. It adds texture, it adds depth to an otherwise fairly flat, bland surface. Just grow it one place, crop it, and just like that, we've added light to the underside of our bridge. As I sit here on the side of the bank, I wonder to myself, what have I made? Well, I can answer that. I've made a bridge. That's very simple. You know what? Screw it. Let's just get in shaders. I know that's what you're all waiting for. And through the power of editing, I am back, and this is the bridge in shaders. And it's a fairly simple stone bridge with a little bit of foliage. It's something I've learned over time, is that a little bit of foliage always goes a long way when making a project. I also find that bridges look sick from underwater perspectives. I don't know why. It just, in shaders, somehow it's just a fog thing. It adds a mystical fog, and bridges always look sick from fish view. So that's my guide on how to make a fairly decent looking bridge in Minecraft that is both functional and relatively good looking. If you like content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It helps me out. It helps my channel grow, one subscriber at a time. And hit the like button, because that somehow has mattered in getting my video out to more people. So I'd like to thank you all for watching. I've been Cadiot, and I'll see you in the next video that you, viewer, you decide that you want to watch, because it was your choice to watch it. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.